What higher consciousness and wisdom will be initiated in humankind in 2024? Well, in today's episode, I'm going to be sharing some excerpts from our live panel of 6 amazing astrologers, me included. So tune in. Welcome to Star Powered Astrology for Changemakers. I'm Leslie Tagorda, your guide, a Hawaii-born Filipino Jewish astrologer who loves navigating visionaries like you through the spiritual journey of your work so that you can be inspired to lead by your chart and become the luminary leader you were born to be. Welcome back, Luminary. It's your brand astrologer, Leslie Tagorda, for our third to the last episode of 2023. That is right. There are 3 more episodes, and today I wanted to share an excerpt from the live panel that we did earlier in this month, Star Powered 2024. Before we go into that, I just wanted to remind you there are 2 more episodes coming up that I know things are getting busy, so if you need to take a break from your family and go out for a walk, or make sure you catch this podcast, because next episode that will drop right before the solstice, I want to share a little bit about solstice. I'm already preparing for solstice with my beautiful poinsettia, which is a solstice plant, actually not a Christmas plant, a solstice plant. And I'm going to be sharing my year wrap up, all of the challenges and all of the gifts from the year. So I'm going to be sharing some really transparent things about all the things we've accomplished and all of the things that were big old misses this year. So that's going to be on December 20th. So catch us for that wrap up. And the day after Christmas, on Canadian Boxing Day, the very final episode of 2023 in Star Powered podcast, I'm going to be sharing the 5 things that I have my eye on in 2024. Specifically, what is ahead for us spiritual entrepreneurs and change makers in the sky. And so be sure to catch that episode on December 26th, because I am going to share everything that you need to know to plan your business for next year. Before we dive into the panel, I wanted to share with you that these are the last few days that you can join Star Powered Circle for 2024. Star Powered Circle, I'll be closing the doors for next year at the end of this week on December 22nd. Remember, Star Powered Circle is a space that I've lovingly created for astrology loving change makers to awaken, co-create, and lead. Now that the early bird specials are done, you can now join Star Powered Circle for just 4 months for the trimester. If you join Star Powered Circle right now for January, February, March, and April, this is the trimester that you definitely want to get in. We'll be starting the year with a new moon ceremony to put together all of our dreams and our aspirations. But then on January 18th, we will be diving deep and doing a visioning exercise where we're going to be looking at where we need to master, breakthrough, and expand in our change making work. We're also going to have an eclipse challenge. Now, the eclipse, I'll just give you a little hint. That first eclipse, that first solar eclipse in Aries that comes at the beginning of the year in March, in the spring, is conjunct Chiron. And that is the eclipse that I have my eye on, because Chiron and the North Node and that eclipse is going to open us up to taking quantum leaps on our leadership journey. So I want you to be prepared to jump forward and play big and share what you have to contribute. So if you want in on that eclipse challenge in community so you can break past some of your fears, you are going to want to get in on that. Then the training that will be done in that first trimester will be starting in February and March. And this is going to be my core foundational trainings. This is going to be the first time I've taught it live in a few years. So not pre-recorded, teaching it live, integrating it live all together in community. That's going to be starting in February and March. written in the stars, so you know all the different pieces, how to read your natal chart and what they mean, not just for your personal life, but in your professional life and in your brand. And then we're going to dive deep into your sun, moon, rising, and descendant so that you can position your work, knowing exactly what you are here to do, why you're doing it, how you're meant to lead, and for whom you are born to serve, your soul customers. So if you want in on that live, this is your last chance to join Star Powered Circle before doors close on December 22nd. So head on over to starpowered.com/circle. And if you've been interested in that Astrobound certification, this is your chance to get in early and get a couple of months free with Circle. If you're interested in that certification, send me an email because I am now taking applications. Okay, but everything starts in Circle. So head on over to starpowered.com/circle to get all of the details. Okay, my friends. So I'm really excited to bring you this excerpt of our Star Powered panel that we did at the beginning of December. And so if you remember me sharing earlier about the Star Powered panel, we were answering, 6 of us astrologers were answering the question, what higher consciousness and wisdom will be initiated in humankind in 2024? And so myself, astrologer Celeste Brooks, astrologer Wade Caves, astrologer and teacher Mulata Sachik, astrologer Isha Lunar, and astrologer Narayana Montufar came together on December 1st to discuss live for 90 minutes what is going to open up for us in 2024 with the energies through the lens of leadership, entrepreneurship, social justice, politics, and environmental change. So this is just an excerpt because we spoke for 90 minutes and I wanted to keep this episode down to 50 minutes. So if there are peaks and sparks and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to know more, head on over to starpower.com/panel and you can get access to the entire panel for just $22. I definitely need to charge for the full panel because we're supporting all 6 of us astrologers. You can get the full replay and a PDF of those slides so you can take that with you. It's just $22 and know that those proceeds go to all 6 of us and our wisdom. So for now, enjoy the excerpt of the panel. Let us know what you think. I would love to hear what catches your heart and your ear. Remember, as we go, the very last episode of 2024, excuse me, I'm recording this during Mercury retrograde. My mind is like, blah. As we get to the end of 2023, that very last episode, I will be expounding on my take of what's in the stars for 2024 so that you can harness this in your business, in your work, and in your leadership. All right, enjoy this episode. And I'm just absolutely delighted to bring on these 5 panelists, all astrologers that I love and adore and respect so deeply. So if you don't already know me, my name is Leslie Tagorda. I call myself a leadership and a brand astrologer. I have a podcast called Star Powered, and I'm hosting this Star Powered 2024. So the 5 of us come together today to really answer the question, what higher consciousness and wisdom will be initiated in humankind in 2024? And maybe it's beyond humankind, all of the creatures that live here on Earth as we are expanding into a new consciousness. So let me introduce all of our guides today. I'll go in alphabetical order. First up is Celeste Brooks, an Oakland, California-based astrologer and a life coach who specializes in moon mastery and mundane astrology. Welcome, Celeste.
Hi, Leslie. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Wonderful. Next up is Wade Caves, a Brooklyn-based astrologer, Brooklyn, New York, astrological consultant and educator specializing in mundane and global topics, an amazing traditional astrology teacher. Welcome, Wade.
Thank you. When we do alphabetical, I never know if it's first name or last, so it's always
Ah.
exciting. Last, it's very different results for me.
Yes, you're like, oh, who's next? Who's next?
Yeah.
Keep
Thanks
you
for
on your
having me.
toes. Thank you for joining. Next up is Ishel Lunar, currently living in Mexico. Ishel is a decolonial cosmologist, a brilliant astrologer and cosmologist, weaving together many different forms of star wisdom. Welcome, Ishel.
Thank you so much, Leslie. It's so great to be here among all of you. Really appreciate it.
And then Narayana Montufar, also hailing from Oakland. You might know Narayana. She is a prolific author, astrologer, and artist specializing in modern astrology. Welcome, Narayana.
Thank you for having me. I am so over the moon about being here with all
Yeah,
these amazing people.
I know, isn't it wonderful? And last but not least, Milada Sachek. I consider Milada one of my astrology mentors. She's an amazing Canadian business astrologer and writing coach specializing in modern and business astrology. Welcome, 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 Milada.
Thank you so much, Leslie. It's really amazing to be here. Thank you for putting this together and bringing us all together and with this amazing community. Thank you.
Yes. So one of my goals of bringing this diverse community together, this inclusive community together, is that we all have these very different perspectives. Each one of us, by design, has our hearts and our eyes on certain parts of the sky. And of course, most of us, if you read our little bios, live, breathe, and dream astrology. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be having a discussion where we're going to have fun. Nothing is going to be linear. Each one of us is going to be talking about something that is really spoken to us. Let's get started. The six of us have been talking about these ideas of 2024 from this idea of leadership, entrepreneurship, social justice, politics, the environment. And we came up with a couple of themes. And we're going to be exploring these themes today, but we're going to be opening up with a bunch of, how do we want to get into this, Celeste and Wade? Retrogrades.
Yeah, we jumped in on that one, didn't we, Celeste? Starting to talk about what's going on there.
Yeah, I love retrogrades. I just love seeing what stories come up to our collective consciousness during this time when we're offered this opportunity to take a step back, slow down, reflect, revisit. All of those RE words are appropriate for the retrograde cycles. And, people are so connected with the Mercury retrograde, but there's something that goes on with each of them of this nature. But we also have to just remember there are times where there's reversals and repetition of previous circumstances or just collapse of things contemplated with retrograde. So it's a good idea to have them on your calendar and be aware, especially the personal planets.
Yeah, so Celeste, and Celeste and Wade, like at this kind of shifting of the year as we kind of turn the chapter from 2023 to 2025, we are in the middle of some of these kind of planetary shifts. Like, which ways are we going? Can you talk to that a little bit as we open up the year?
But something that was on my mind as we're moving through this kind of discussion is what's happening visually with the planets as they retrograde and as they station. So if you can imagine, you have the sun here and then the planets orbit around. It's when it comes, but then the earth is down here. When the planet swings between the sun and the earth, that's when it appears to be moving backward. And what happens at this stage is that it ends up being the closest to earth that it can be, whereas when it's direct, it's from the furthest from the earth that it can be. So what happens in this kind of image is that direct motion is supposed to be associated almost with like the philosophically pure version of the like virtue of that planet, the meanings of that planet. But as it swings closer to Earth, it begins to become more and more concrete, more and more practical. And so ideas This is why when we have retrogrades, everything comes back to us in some kind of physical form. Things shut down. Our technology stops working. The mail gets sent back to us. We get the notification that the money didn't actually clear. Like the concrete reality of these ideas that we've been perpetuating start kind of pushing into, an interesting material reality. And Mercury will also station in the beginning part of this year. I don't know if you had any thoughts about the actual stations themselves, Celeste, or that, yeah.
I do. Yeah. So one thing that really jumps out at me is that Mercury is going to go retrograde on December 12th this year at 8 degrees of Capricorn. And that's where it's stationed direct in January. So maybe this is part of the George Santos story of him today, the day Mercury went into Capricorn, being expelled from Congress, but because he started in Congress back then in
Well,
January.
this little dance, Mercury does this frequently. So, you've just given one example, but Mercury is going to station direct at 22 degrees of Sagittarius. That'll happen on the 2nd of January, 2024. But it will retrograde. It will station retrograde at 22 degrees Sagittarius at the tail end of November. So I think we get an opportunity with these retrograde because they're part of two different cycles, aren't they? Like one of them is like the closing of a former one, but somehow they get linked through the same degree being occupied at the start of one and end of the other, and brings them into an interesting contrast. So it creates kind of a portal almost. It's a good thing to remember, because if you experience anything through this time, not everything we experience is down to a Mercury direct or retrograde. Sometimes this thing was riding on the back of a Venus Mars wave or something else, or nothing. It could have just been fitting through the cracks. But the things that will be riding on Mercury signification in the front half of the year around that station will be revisited again at the retrograde at the back half of the year.
Well, it seems like, right, we're at this kind of like liminal space as we move into 2024, and we have these three planets are shifting right at the beginning of 2024 tail end. We have Mercury, we have Uranus, we have Jupiter, and these energies, like I love, Wade, what you used to, or what one of your mantras is how the story unfolds. And it seems like throughout the end of through the year, as we move towards the end of the year, talking about these personal planets, we have that Mars retrograde. How does that Mars integrate with Mercury and Uranus? Like those feel pretty important to me.
Well, the Mars retrograde is at the tail end of the year, and it's at 6 degrees of 6 degrees of Leo. So definitely look at your chart, see where you have 6 degrees of Leo, and it's going to back it up to 17 degrees of Cancer. So that part of your chart is where Mars is going to go retrograde, and there could be some frustrations around that, or irritation. It's a good idea to understand what parts of your life are going to be impacted by that and pre-plan so that you can lighten your load in that area of your life as much as you can for when Mars goes retrograde.
Especially as we think about, we have all of our Mercury retrogrades, all of the outer planets are going retrograde, but as we move to the end of the year, November and December, we have that Mars retrograde, which the last time we had a Mars retrograde was at the time of, at least in the United States, the insurrection of the January 6th insurrection. What is concerning, and I'm not a fear-mongering kind of astrologer. It's this is okay, what do we need to prepare for that? When we have that Mars retrograde, it's going to be opposing Pluto that entire time. And so we're not getting out our umbrellas. We're getting prepared and getting some fire blankets.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's hard to know exactly what. I think as we watch the story unfold throughout the course of the year, I think there will be points of obvious, okay, we can pick up on this and, try to build up on the story a little bit, see a little bit where social media is taking things. There's fire blankets to look out for, but I think we'll get a test run. I took a long time to just say that.
Yeah. Dovetailing on that with Wade saying a test run, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens around July 15th. That's when Mars will meet Uranus at 23 degrees of Taurus, which is so close to Algol, that fixed star that's very feared throughout different cultures, that on a it's at 26 Taurus. On a global level, will likely be some kind of chaotic events.
So I wonder with like the other astrologers here, I wonder if you have any kind of like what can we do to mitigate some of these energies, or not to mitigate them in our own personal lives and our work, but like how do we optimize and strategize to use these energies?
Well, the retrogrades of Mercury always, because Mercury is closest to us. And now we're moving into fire. You know, we're moving into fire.
Element,
Mercury going retrograde in all fire signs. This year, Mercury went retrograde in earth signs. So there is a lot of movement in terms of money, possessions, resources. And now we're moving into fire signs. So we're going to be changing the way we go after things, the way we create things, and the way we defend what is important to us. And so that's going to be really, I think, a pivotal energy in terms of realizing that a lot of us need to start doing something.
Yeah.
And how at the end of the day, fire is what gets you started, right? So we're going to be transforming that. And so something to think about in terms of your question, Leslie, is uniting the fire houses in your chart and figure out from there, what can you do, right? Where's the fire in your chart? Is it in the 12th house? Is it in the 6th house? Is it in the 10th house? You know, it depends. And unite those houses and try to find ways, because there are many different ways to get going and be part of the revolution.
Yeah, that's a good a good recommendation. Thinking about, like, at least we're an entrepreneurial position, and as we move our conversation into kind of eclipse season and more Mars and more fire, why this fire? We need this all. Like, we have to let go of all the places that we've been hiding and really jump in and overcome our fears to take a stand and make the change that we want to see. And so I love what you said, Narayana, about just like, where's the fire in your chart? We all have it. So let's spark some of that fire internally for our own inner power so we can really make use of these energies. Oh yeah, Celeste.
So I think, and to tie on to that point, it's really important for us to be as well resourced as we can around those Mercury retrogrades and the fire signs, and talking about like getting exercise and sleep hygiene habits so that we don't use that fire, that's going retrograde to lash out at others or ourselves, or do things that are impulsive that can create some kind of havoc in our own lives too.
But Mars is still really important when we come to like the nodes. North node will still be in Aries, ruler of that north node all throughout the year. And then the nodes impact our eclipses. And just hearing how Malata was like, okay, well, we have to like release some of these pressures. And to me, eclipses have this opportunity to release a lot of pressure and go, woohoo, where are we going at this point? So Mariana, do you want to talk about some eclipses and how it's awakening leadership this year? Because this one is the one that's like really in my heart.
Yeah, and that's why I was also talking about the Mercury. All Mercury retrogrades will be activating Chiron.
Yeah. Chiron is so active next year.
So active, and they will be activating Venus too. But I think that that's a little obvious, but the Chiron activations, which also we're looking into the beginning of the year, bringing an Aries stellium, right? And then the eclipse, I believe the April eclipse with an Aries stellium, it's all being led by Chiron. Why? Because Chiron's been there since 2018. And we had Chiron activations at the beginning of this year already, when Jupiter went through Aries. Yeah. And so this is the time, one of my favorite astrologers, Barbara Handclough, just talks about Chiron being the bridge between, we know that, but I really like the rainbow, because it's kind of like what we need to bridge you know, the older generations with the newer generations, if we're going to do anything. If you are around my age, which is I just turned 44, you were probably born with Pluto in Libra, and you are being called to step up right now because you have Chiron opposing your Pluto, right? And so that might be a really transformative time for you, but you're being called to step up and do something to elevate the masculine energy here on Earth. That's how I see Chiron in Aries being processed in the world right now, right? Or how we're living it at a collective level, because Chiron is the wound, but it's also the gift.
Oh, yes. Wounds to
Chiron
wisdom.
It's the wounded, you know, sometimes I would like to add the wounded gifted healer. I feel like, because that's where the money is. We're basically in this process of clearing the wounded masculine in the world. And that relates to leadership. You were born with Chiron in Taurus, right? That's when Chiron was discovered. And so if you have that, and I think there's a combination of that, a lot of us that have that combination, you have a gift to give to the world. And the eclipses can actually unlock that. Going back to the eclipses.
I'm going through very early Chiron return. Like I'm like exact Chiron return right now, which has been like absolutely fascinating. And in my work, we've been teaching about Chiron. And, you know, I love this idea, what you said about Chiron being the bridge, not just astronomically between different parts of our solar system, but between being spiritual, being a human, being wounded, being a healer. And this awakening of this bridging, I feel that to me, Chiron is so important in 2024 because we are changing the faces of leadership and awakening a new type of leadership if we think of Aries as the leader. And I feel like these eclipses, because especially that first eclipse that I want to hear what you say about is like conjunct Chiron. Sitting on top of my natal Chiron, I'm like, ooh, what's gonna happen?
Yeah, I mean, we're Mercury retrograde, Venus, the North Node. I had here.
Yeah, there's like all of them.
Yeah, so basically, you know, and this is interesting because now Chiron is like not at the tail end, but it has moved into the third decan, right? But I think the eclipses are they're gonna be intense because like we have Mars ruling the North Node. You know, Mars keeps coming up. I feel like, is it like one of the main players of the astrology this year? I feel like we keep going back to Mars. And so what we can do, all of us, to Milada was saying, we need to work with our Martian energy at a personal level. Again, you know, because the North Node forming eclipses, and then we have Venus ruling the South Node. So basically, we're like clearing all of the relationships, all of the anything that stands in our way from like stepping up.
Yeah, people pleasing and just like dysfunctional relationships. I want to, can we spend some time as a group talking about this April 8th solar eclipse that's right near the Aries ingress? I feel like that's like one of the peaks of this year. There's so many things going on astrologically about that eclipse.
Well, something I find interesting is that we're having the lunar eclipse at 5 degrees of Libra on March 25th, before the solar eclipse, which is a total solar eclipse that will be seen across the United States, as well as on March 25th, the United States, using the Sibley chart, is going to have a progressed new moon at 20 degrees of Pisces. So I think there's going to be a big water story that is part of this eclipse season. And at the solar eclipse, there's a stellium in Pisces with Mars, Saturn, Venus, and Neptune. So I think there's some kind of big story about water and boundaries around water.
The connections that like Celeste was making to the stories related to water rights, water distribution, water safety, water conservation, water health. This Aries, sorry, not the Aries ingress, the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction already told us that we're in a 2-decade period where our relationship to water, the choices we make now, will see the next 240 years, you know.
Goodness.
Also in the news, the world news, has been the issue of the forever chemicals in the water, which I think is going to become more and more of a huge concern for the world's water supply, and what that means for our bodies in particular, and whether or not we can integrate that in a healthy way or not as a species.
That's, I think, one final thought on the eclipses, and just like coming back to Chiron, you know, that we'll be talking more about that Taurus Uranus, but Chiron and the North Node meet up in February, and they're still really close by the time the eclipse happens in April. And I feel like at that time, that's how we're sparking that leadership, that individual leadership. And when I say changing the faces of leadership, it's that everybody is seeing themselves as a participant in leadership. That part of like Pluto leaving Capricorn is that these top-down leadership and governments and organizations are really starting to come down, and we are rising up individually to know what we're here to contribute, knowing our strengths, knowing our gifts, and each be a leader in our own right. Malada, can we change the direction of our conversation? And I want to talk about that Pluto, because Pluto is going to be making some big moves too. And you had some kind of bridges to Gen X and the Libra Pluto generation, and why this is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. So Pluto changing sign, right, again and again. So it's gonna be dancing into Aquarius in January. So we've already seen a little bit of that in the past year. I know a lot of that has been associated with the acceleration in development of technology. And then, of course, when it comes to Pluto, it's always, probably, in all cases, but especially I would say with Pluto is a little bit more extreme, is to see, we have this sort of transformative side of it, and sort of the like really the rumbling that it creates from pulling the stuff from the unconscious and from the past, and then also this sort of major transformation, and then ultimately advancement that occurs as we get in touch. And I like to say, usually people say, oh, my Pluto, right, is rising, or my Pluto in the first house. It actually, and I like to jokingly or sort of cheekishly, right, remind us it's not really our Pluto, even if I have Pluto rising, it really is a collective Pluto. So it represents this collective unconscious. It represents this generational trauma, or it really is symbolizes. This is what we associated astrologically. Right in November is when officially Pluto is, even though it dances into Aquarius in 2024 in late January, until stays there for a few months, and then it goes back into Capricorn in September, and then it for good moves into Aquarius. Of course, as we're seeing now in the world, this is, I believe it's obviously not just me, but I think a lot of people that are looking at it from different perspectives, is connected with this whole really the post-colonial world, right, and really the time of reckoning with the colonial history, right, all the way from the British Empire, right, origination, and to all of that's created in the world. Now we can see how, even looking at some of the events, right, more recently that has been more brought into the public eye, saying, oh, when that event happened, and let's talk about that event, right, in October. And then some people are like, well, no, we got to look at the history, right? And then you look at the history, the last 10 years, the last 20 years, and you got to go back 75 years, and then you got to, you can even go prior to that. And that's what Pluto is, especially when it's completing a cycle, is reminding us there is a completion of a cycle here. And that cycle is also bringing forward, right, it's challenging. It's saying we got to reckon not just with Pluto in Capricorn, but also with Pluto in Cancer, which I believe has also brought these themes of confronting racism, ultra nationalism. So not just patriotism, but really ultranationalism, meaning like the extreme versions of it, and then a harm, right, and the terror that it can really bring, really, and collectively, right, that we're all in some ways participating, if not obviously being aware of. When it moves into the air signs, it also is associated with potential threats to our air, air pollution, our skies, because it's associated with the sky. And then also because of the opposition with Leo, then it's also going to be, and we're going to see that, but I can imagine that it's going to be connected with some space battle situation, which is already happening when it comes to satellites and mass surveillance systems, and even some conversations around how to harvest the energy of the sun, right? So as Pluto in Aquarius opposes Leo. Now, on the other end of it, it creates this huge, it really pulls for all of us that are on the planet right now. We know we're here for a reason. I would say for the most part, and we're going to see, I suspect, and it's not just me, I think all of us are probably realizing that one way or the other, millions of people are awakening and realizing we're getting out of that a little bit, the survival, right, sort of instinct that I believe Narayana was referring to. And out of like, this is happening to us, or this is happening to me too. We've come here for a reason. I believe, have chosen, all of us, every single person on this planet. Now, we all have different, obviously complicated stories we're bringing, and different roles we're playing for different reasons, some of which is probably too difficult and complicated to comprehend. But I do really believe that we're here for a reason, that we're equipped to navigate this.
I want to add a little bit about just hearing about that Pluto in Aquarius, and how, in 2024, as Pluto does its like final dances on these last degrees, as we're moving into our empowerment of the people. I wonder for you, Mulata, for everybody else, like, what are some gifts that we can, or what are some things that we can do to prepare ourselves for this big transformation, this big death and rebirth?
Mm-hmm. So I'll mention three things briefly, and then I would love to hear from my colleagues as well.
Please.
So I would say number one thing would be to learn astrology. And obviously, I suspect many of you who are online, because this is going to be not just power, this is also power to astrology. And we're seeing this. I'm a member of one of the major associations, astrology associations in Canada. But if you're a member of any other international astrology associations, you may have seen major shifts in transformation in astrological organizations, because Aquarius is about organizing. So, but it's also about transformation, personal transformation, collective, knowing, forecasting, knowing to know what's going to happen, but let me get informed. So learn astrology if you can. If not, then see who you can follow to actually get a little bit of the insight. And I would say join movements that I would say more follow independent voices. I would say future is independent, if I can be a little bit political here, but really not political. It really is in alignment with cycles, and we're going to see why that's going to be important, although that can also present a sort of a threat to the independent, and we'll see how that develops. So I would say those are the two main things, and there are more, but
Mars and Jupiter is really kind of what I wanted to talk about, but we'll bring Saturn into this too, just to make it a tight little bow. These are the three superior planets, the last three that are visible with the naked eye, and they represent kind of the higher order of existing structures that exist out in the world. When these three come together, we tend to have issues. We had the conjunction of all of them in Capricorn. If you remember, in 2020, we had the Australian bushfires, and then everything else that we had in 2020. And then in 2021, we had a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction with Mars squaring from Taurus. And we remember what happened January 6th in 2020. That was when this was going on. It was the US insurgency. And this year, we've got a real strong dance happening between these planets. So let me just kind of outline the big players here. We have a conjunction between Mars and Saturn in April. That'll happen in Pisces. In August, there's a conjunction between Mars and Jupiter. And I've done a lot of research on the Israel-Palestine conflict, war, genocide, aggression, and everything that's going on, for the last 100 years with respect to that territory. And one of the points that is really consistently seen is that when Mars and Saturn come into conjunction, Israel gets its concessions. And then when Mars and Jupiter come into conjunction, Palestine gets its concessions. And we have these lined up very close next to each other. But in August, the conjunction between Mars and Jupiter, which has historically favored the Palestinian cause, is at the exact same time, within days, also Mars square Saturn, Jupiter square Saturn. So I'm watching, what's happening in August with the Mars, Jupiter, Saturn configuration and wondering, where in the world we might see that really manifest. My guess is that if we haven't seen this issue in the Middle East resolve, to a place where it was before October 7th, and we might expect an escalation at this period. But I think on the world stage at large, there's going to be a lot of crisis of confidence. Mars is hitting Jupiter, Saturn's hitting Jupiter. There's a lot of confidence shaking that happens at this stage. So I just wanted to say, the dance that's happening between Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Jupiter, Mars and Jupiter this year, I think I said them all, whatever, Mars, Saturn. There's a lot to watch, and things will be moving at relatively rapid pace. Every few months, there's going to be a hit that's worth noting.
Yes, Celeste.
Yeah, this Jupiter in Gemini. I think we need to remember that Jupiter is going into Gemini in May, and it's going into detriment, the sign of its detriment, where it may act in extreme and unstable ways. Yeah, so really with an election coming up in the United States, I think being mindful of what sources you're reading, like reliable sources. There's going to be massive disinformation campaigns that we're going to have to, I think we're going to have to protect ourselves psychologically from an onslaught of false information coming at us, intending to propaganda.
So what I'm really looking forward to, like, I think this is like kind of the cherry on top of the entire year, is the great big leap conjunction between Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus. And I would love to hear everybody's thoughts on this. Does anybody want to initiate, spark the conversation? Yeah, Malada.
I love that we have that amazing aspect this year that's helpful. And I wanted to actually remind more so from utilizing this in your personal lives as well in businesses. So if we have entrepreneurs in the group, right, in the audience, which I'm sure we have plenty, utilize the first part of the year. So yes, we are a bit biased now towards this Jupiter in Taurus, right? It's good so if you're an entrepreneur, really putting out your offers, and if you haven't raised your prices for a while, then recalibrating your prices. But really, I would say not even waiting until April. So knowing that it comes together with Uranus, which could really, especially if you tap into it, if you have planets in Earth signs, especially in that third decan, especially Taurus, but also Capricorn and Virgo, and even in Scorpio as it opposes it, really, I would say even start gearing up as early as February so that you're ready even to launch things in March, so that come that eclipse month later, you actually are really seeing the benefits of that. And then the second part of the year, I would just add, is while Jupiter is going to be in the sign opposite of its rulership, which I refer to as contrarian, I believe it's going to give a big boost. So the first part of the year to the entrepreneurs and the moneymakers, and those who are helping people create their offers and grow food. The second part of the year, writers, speakers, teachers. So make sure you're aligned with your values. And I believe the books need to be written. And maybe it's going to be like, I want to publish a book well, then let's get to writing. So the moment you hear Jupiter is in Gemini, that's the second part of the year. Please do, especially even as it turns retrograde, even as this election and whatever is going to be going on thing, ramps up. Write your stories, write your books.
Yes.
I want to definitely help people to understand what these Jupiter-Uranus aspects looked like throughout history. The last being in Pisces Aries in 2010 and 11, where we had some really big responses to the financial crisis and some big shifts globally that happened around banking and that sort of thing. As well, Instagram, we talked about social media a little bit. Instagram was born in October of 2010. under the conjunction, and Facebook was born under the opposition in 2004, 2003, 2004. So, but going back to when it was in Taurus, when it was in opposition, was when we had the New Deal in the United States, which we had massive infrastructure creation. The SEC was created, the FDIC was created. We had the response to the soil crisis with the Dust Bowl in the South, and being able to support farmers. But we had the formation of the labor board. The Fair Labor Act came into being, and because of so much that had happened during the Great Depression, that collectivism that came forth, and utilizing that incredible expansive energy of Jupiter and those sudden rapid shifts, that ability to really make things happen and have things happen in a rapid way. I don't want us to lose that opportunity, but also really be cautious. When we talk about chakra energy, we can really blow our minds in a literal way. It can be those incredible sparks of ingenuity and innovation. Most incredible movements around art and music and science were all birthed under Uranus and Jupiter aspects, whether conjunct or square or in opposition. There are such incredible opportunities for folks if you are paying attention and if you're there. But in terms of that cautionary tale, don't girl boss too close to the sun, because you will get burned because of that Jupiter that is a little can be a little eyes are bigger than our stomachs, taking too many commitments on, thinking that we can do too much. And so just to really stay within your physical capacity, care for that physical capacity, but man, be ready for those sparks of genius that come through, because this could be the year that you create something that has never been created before.
Well, I'd like to do a little summary now so we can respect everybody's time. So let me share my screen, and we're going to do a kind of a little Saturnian summary, because I know our conversation was in flow, not super linear, but now we're going to go bring on our Saturn hats. And Saturn being really placing itself in all of Pisces next year, just sustaining us through, and bringing more back to this idea of like Earth Mother, and how we need to be so responsible for our spiritual focus and mastery, how we need to be responsible for the water, how we need to really be responsible for keeping the peace within ourselves and feeling interconnected as Saturn remains in Pisces next year. So, just kind of a timeline at a glance. We have some of our bigger shifts at the bottom, with Pluto moving into Aquarius, Chiron North Node conjunction in Aries in February. Right after, then we have the eclipses. Then we have Jupiter and Uranus meeting up on 4/20. Jupiter entering Gemini, and a bunch of eclipses, and Mars opposite Pluto as it goes through its retrograde. We have some of the retrograde movements up top, so you can just kind of see where those directions. And I don't know if you saw in the chat, but Celeste, noted that there's this one chunk of time, just this one chunk of time between the end of January and the beginning of April, where all planets are direct. So making sure you're taking action on these times, because the cosmos is with you. And then of course our solar milestones with the solstices and the eclipses. Well, so I just want to thank you, panelists. Thank you, Celeste and Wade and Michelle and Milada and Narayana, for joining me in this conversation. All right, my friends, thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. If you really want to hear more and learn more about all of the astrologers and get the entire panel recording, you can head over to starpower.com/panel. And if you are interested in joining me and this beautiful global community of change makers who love astrology and are collaborating and co-creating and leading together, head on over to starpower.com/circle. Doors are open until the end of the week, December 22nd. All right, talk to you soon. As a human design projector, my energy shines more brightly because of people like you who share my work. If you enjoy this podcast and want to help build a movement of innovative astrology and leadership and spark the intuitive revolution, please rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, or better yet, share this podcast with your change-making besties. We will all shine brighter together as we create the future we want to see.